Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second day of MiniDebConf Online Edition. Today, for the first talk is entitled GemRB 20 Years of the Engine and the Look Forward, and it will be by Jaka, who works as a full-time environmentalist, but he also works in free software-related projects, such as GemRB and GA2 Strategiela, for two different game engines. So let's have a warm welcome first for Jaka.
Hi, I'm Jaka, and I'm a big open source, open data, open knowledge, open science, all that sort of stuff fan. And today I have my gaming hat on and I'll be speaking about GemRB, which is an RPG engine. And it doesn't have anything to do with Ruby, even though maybe the name kind of sounds like it. Nothing to do with Ruby, it's with gems, but the name is deliberately odd in a sense for copyright reasons. Back in the day I had nothing to do with it, but it stands for game engine made with pre-rendered background, because it was an engine and still is an engine that is a re-implementation of IE, which luckily doesn't mean Internet Explorer in our case, but the Infinity engine. And this is the engine that powered some really epic and classic games such as Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Planescape Torment, games that are really known for their powerful gameplay, really intriguing storytelling, some of the ugliest protagonists, and some of the most memorable companions. Now, of course, these games are really known for their interactivity, branching storylines, and player choice, which is not something that could be said about all modern RPGs, but it is what it is. And it's part of the reason why we love these games. In general, they're all isometric. They all follow complex rule sets, in this case mostly Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which is D&D version 2 basically, or 2.5. They have really complex system, unique items, not auto-generated content, and a lot of depth in a sense. And all these games were really popular and still are, and surely that created a lot of interest from the players to create additional content, additional tweaks, additional fixes, and various gaming communities sprung up, be general or dedicated just to this engine, just to these games. And on the Gibberlings tree is the one where we also find our home. Anyway, the modders started exploring the games, and they quick realized that some of the game formats are actually plain text, like the 2DA files, which are almost, or at least partially, self-documenting, so it was easy to make some of the quick tweaks. But other parts of the engine, other parts of the data is in binary formats, so they weren't understood, of course, because they're all proprietary, custom for the engine. So as people were exploring them, they started to collate all this information in this great tool, this great website that we have called ISDP, which has information about the file formats, about the scripting system, about the action system, about the opcodes for the effects, all little details, and it's still being built up as our understanding of the engines grows. And a better understanding, of course, enables better modding, and from that all these tools have been developed to modify and create new binary files. But of course, all these tools are still interesting also for us as a project, because they would be the main content toolkit for GemRB as well. But the really cool thing about this modding community is that they created Wado, which is an Objective Camel based language to write mods in, and this allows basically to mods to modify binary formats and files in a safe way, but also it allows intercompatibility between mods. So you can have several mods modifying the same file, and unless they try to modify the exact same thing, there won't be any conflicts. And Wado allows uninstalling, reinstalling, backups, configuration of mods, so you don't need to have 20 versions just to tweak a little thing. So very powerful tool, a bit opaque, I guess, and hard to understand, but very powerful, and I haven't seen anything like it for any other gaming system. Now, GemRB has been here for 20 years. We had an anniversary in August, but it hasn't been after all the games came out. It actually came out, well, let's say the official start as we know it came after the release of Icewind Dale 1, and Baldur's Gate 2 wasn't even out there at that point. And what this means is that all these engines are not they are unique in a sense that several studios worked on them in different branches, not merging back, meaning that several things got re-implemented several times in different ways, sometimes poorly. There was not that much code share, but it is what it is. So various studios, various code bases, but GemRB of course tries not to be a vanilla engine implementation, so not just copying all the silly design decisions, mistakes and poor choices, but we want to do better. We are one engine, many as one, unifying everything together and adding little small improvements here and there to just enhance the, let's say, vanilla experience. So we're this stracciatella sort of project. Now, of course, the type of work has changed throughout time. We initially had to focus a lot on reverse engineering, disassembling, and really understanding how things work. But through time, of course, more and more work is going into improvements, enhancements themselves, and it's looking better and better and better. And this will also make it more palatable for people that want to implement the new games using our engine. When it comes to features, of course, since we already from the start wanted to be a portable implementation, we really do work on really some bizarre hardware and some bizarre operating systems, and we still try to maintain that compatibility even though as the software and the dependency that we use mature. We of course liberal licensed. We added a bunch of innovations and enhancements on top of the original capabilities. We had mobile ports like 10 years ago, input changes, stuff like that. But also we really try to work on the engine in an extensible way to make it easier for modders to enhance these games, to enhance or write further games, to have as little hard-coded logic as possible. And it shows. But also, because I say it shows because there are some really cool mod ideas that are only possible in our engine, and some of them really sell it over the originals. Anyway, we haven't focused on multiplayer support at all because that's just a big can of worms, and maybe it will happen once we have really excellent support for everything else, but it has never been a focus. GemRB is written in C++, that's the core of the engine and most of the plugins, but then we also have a plugin for the Python bindings, and Python bindings is, well, I guess the original engines used a bit of Lua, not sure why, but we use Python to really create the graphical user interface. So the original provides data files that define the framework for how a window should look and where the buttons should be, but none of the logic. So we implement all of the setup, all of the logic in Python because it's much faster to iterate with, much more forgiving when it comes to mistakes and differences between engines, and it's much easier for people to contribute as well. And then we have GameScript, which is the language for the scripts and dialog scripts in the original engine. So we have to implement that too, basically. So all the AI and cutscenes work. Now I mentioned plugins. We have plugins for, one per file type, basically. So for PNG support, for BIM support, for creature loaders and stuff like that. And it helps keep the code a bit split up. But of course, there are more improvements that could be done here because some of the core files, core objects are still pretty tightly knit together. And as far as data and this extensibility that I mentioned, the original came with a data folder and then an override folder. And in the override folder, any files that are there will basically override files from anywhere else. So we want to support modding, so we have to enable modders to modify the files that we provide. So we provide an unhardened folder for data that is searched it's basically meant for new files that are there, new tables, stuff like that. But if modders want to override it, they can put it into the game override. It has precedence over it. But then we have also our own override folder, which is where we put files We rarely do it, but sometimes it's required, either for let's say very ugly fixes for data bugs or for unification purposes. So the few files that we have in Arona override are there to override whatever the game provides and can be overridden by mods, or at least not easily. And of course, if it's done in an incompatible way, it will break other things. And as far as the project infrastructure, we've done the bronze badge, most of the silver badge of the core infrastructure initiative best practices thing. We have a bunch of build bots, static analyzers, all that good stuff that helps us create better software. Now, we've been with the drawing backend for like 15 years now, so screenshots have always been pretty much the same, not much to show, not much potential for visual changelogs. But when it comes to games that we target and support, all are playable, but Icewind Dale is not fully playable yet. You can't finish the game. The parts that you can play are pretty polished, but there are still some scripting things that we don't understand fully and are blocking a full run through. And Planescape Torment is also not polished as much because it has a bunch of ugly hard-coded features and projectiles that we still don't understand fully, so we haven't managed to re-implement them fully. We also ship a demo, like a small alpha of a tech demo, which could be the basis of a new game, but a new game doesn't exist on our engine. And we also don't support the enhanced editions. And the enhanced editions are a thing that came out from 2012 onwards. Beamdog got their hands on the original source code for Baldur's Gate 2, and then they started updating games by porting them to this engine. And this is an ongoing process. We lost one of our own developers to it, but no hard feelings. And it really also helped us in a sense, because it really revived the community, brought new contributors, brought new interest, it was like a revival, a renaissance of the whole community in a wider sense. And of course that benefits also us. And we're not really competition. In an interview, the CTO said very nice things about GemRB, and we also don't support EEs, not from some diplomatic sense, but there just hasn't been much interest in supporting the features that were added later. Many we support already because they were added just because they had to merge different engine features, which we did from the start. And some things were actually inspired by our own work, but we have work to do for making sure the originals work fine. And once some time passes, I'm sure Beamdog will stop working on this, will stop updating games, and maybe in 10 years times there will be again a need for GemRB also for the EEs, and there will be more interest to contribute EE only features so we can support the gameplay for generations to come. So it's kind of a weird relationship, but it works. What our near future holds on the roadmap, we have to finish this subviews branch, which is a larger factoring of our windowing system, really cleans up things, and some graphic stuff and some text subsystem. It really turned into a huge branch, a huge refactoring that's been taking over 2 years now. So we also missed the train to port to Python 3 in time. So currently we're not even including in Debian anymore because they purged all the Python 2 packages. So yeah, this is really the near future roadmap in the exact same order, and the current work relates to improving the demo. Finally, someone started to add new content to it to improve the placeholders that I put there, and this would be, the basis for a new game if it ever comes to that. Various scripting bug fixes, various other drawing bug fixes. So finally, some visual changelog that can show really small details in the bottom corner. You can see to properly draw. It's basically about order and overlaps. We've been integrating some of the fixes of recent port updates and basic cleanups that are there from static analysis. So for a new game, what would be needed? Well, it really needs proper documentation of all the workflows, some automation, because existing tools and modding instructions are there, but they're not there for all file formats. Some things are sort of off limits to modders if they just work on the original or enhanced games. And of course, you're also limited in a sense if you don't want to code to the same rule sets that are implemented in the engine. There was some interest from indie studios so far, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 across the years, but nobody actually chose GemRB so far, so we are still only in this Infinity Engine world. Some are blocked by license consideration, but in general I think we only need to keep improving, get some proper content creators on board, and start the meta process of enabling proper game creation. Thank you for your attention. We'll have a brief Q&A now, and I'm done.
1, go. Polo. Polo.
Oh, sorry, my microphone was muted. Sorry, everyone. So the first question somebody asks is how will you know when a project is done? When implementing a feature to match the IE, how do you determine if you should copy the original implementation or improve it? And how do you get improvements using the same approach, giving different contributors?
Well, it's a very good question. First, of course, for the original games, we in a sense know what the end target is. We want them to be fully playable, to be supported even in some of their micro features. So that is easy. Of course, there are different levels of, let's say, perfectionism that you can strive for. And we've always had different people contribute at different levels. And, some are better at the beginning where, you just need the basics, the frameworks, and some are really pointillistic and want to really polish things into pure diamonds. So I'm sure it will take quite a while still. We also want to really improve this tech demo that we ship, which is an ongoing process, and it's more of a data and exploration documentation process. So it's in some ways much easier than reverse engineering some weird projectile from Planescape Torment or something like that. So we don't have a set timeline to say, okay, by 2030 we'll have 300% of all the features that we need, and we'll be done, and it will be just maintenance mode from then on.
Makes sense. So another question is, do you work with upstream developers like Beamdog, Icewind Dale 2 in particular, given that the original source seems to be lost?
Well, we haven't worked directly with them. They were helpful by sharing some file headers, some pointers when there were questions asked about certain functionality. But besides Avenger going to work for them, we haven't worked directly, really. Yeah, sure, Icewind Dale 2 source code is supposedly lost. I don't know if that's true, but they haven't been interested in using GemRB for their enhanced edition or something like that. And in the meanwhile, they missed the train in a sense because the modding community itself wrote a few exa hacks to extend the original's capabilities and bring a sort of an enhanced edition version themselves.
Good. Maybe one last question if we have time. How much Python 2 code do you still have to port to Python 3?
Oh, that's a good question, but I think we actually don't have that much code because most of the Python that we use is quite simple code, I would say. So I believe Py 2 to 3 will handle most of the volume of Python. Then we have a little use of meta classes to make things more concise. So maybe a bit of that will need to be updated. and the plugin itself that provides the binding has, I don't know, I mean, if you look at the plugin, it looks like, oh shit, there's thousands and thousands of lines of codes, but that's actually individual functions that we need. So the layer that makes it work is pretty thin. So I don't think we'll have that much work. I think if anything, the biggest change will be with handling strings because of the big change from Python 2 to Python 3. So once we got the subviews branch merged, I think we can, and I hope, not just think, I think we can have a quick release afterwards with Python 3, just to be able to get back into the Debian and children.
Great. Well, that's thanks a lot for the talk. That's all the time we have, sadly. But thanks a lot, and thanks for your work on GemRB. 20 years, it's a great achievement. Thanks.
Thank you.